In this segment, we're going to talk about electrical issues. And the first step in the electrical problem solving is remove power from the system. Okay, now this thing is electrically dead, but we're going to show you how to connect and check things. So maybe the first thing to do is to check the connections on the cell and make sure they're secure. So we use different size nuts or bolts on the top and bottom so that you cannot cross up the positive lead with the negative lead when you're reassembling the system or replacing a cell. So you simply use a nut, a wrench, and a backup, and you make sure that the screws and bolts are tight. So just tighten them up, make sure they're good and tight, and then do the same thing with the top. And again, they're different sizes. The top is a 1/2 inch, 13 millimeter, and the bottom is 5/16. So the next thing to check is the output of the power supply. And so first thing to do is remove the connector, and you look in both sockets and make sure everything looks clean and secure and there's nothing burned in there. Okay, now in order to check this power supply output, we're going to have to reconnect power to it. But what comes out of here is DC voltage. It's non-lethal. It's like a car battery. So you connect the power to it and you put a meter on these two leads, and you should have at least 12 volts direct current reading out of this. If you're not getting 12 volts, it's lower than 12 volts, then the power supply is suspect for failure. So then remove the power again, reconnect, and the next place to check things is inside the control box. So you use a Phillips screwdriver, you unscrew the 4 screws in the corner. We've conveniently left out 2 so it's quick and easy to do. And then you open up the box, and there's a connector with wires to the switch and the LED light up here, and then there's also a connector that goes to the pump. If you ever see the pump rotating in the wrong direction or rotating back and forth, then the wire here is suspect. The connector may not be plugged into the pump securely, or the connector may not be pushed into the control board securely. So check those connections, make sure they're plugged in good, and everything is working okay there. The next thing to check in here are the high power connections. So again, power is disconnected. You then check each of the 4 big wires and their termination points. There's 2 over here on the right and 2 over here on the left. So you put the screwdriver on there, you torque them down, make sure they're good and tight. Do all 4 of them. When you know they're secure, then that's another possible source of the problem. So while you're in the control box, check the connector, make sure it's secure here, make sure the connector is plugged into the circuit board down here. Also, the thermal well has a wire that goes through this HACO connector, and this HACO connector is watertight sealed to the box. So there should be no water in the box. And you check the connector, that's the gray wire, make sure it's plugged in correctly into the circuit board. If everything looks good and tight, or you notice something and fixed it, then you put it back together. Okay. And then you plug it back in, put all the hoses back in the brine and the oxidant tank, and you start it up and make sure that it works. Now while we're at it here, we have not put these hoses together for demonstration. They're connected. do not turn on the system with these hoses connected. What occurs is electrolysis in the cell, and gas is forming in the cell, and pressure will build up in these hoses, and they'll blow apart at either the connections on the pump or here. So do not run the system with the hoses connected. So we'll disconnect. Okay, and then turn the system on. Make sure everything works fine, and it is working. So with that, you can turn it off and then put everything back together, seal it up, but make sure that the two hoses are disconnected when you turn the power on.